Much for making the time to join us this morning. Today on the show, we shall be taking a look at the very latest that's making headlines and catching you up on what has been prioritized in the dailies here in the country and, of course, beyond. Thank you so much for joining us.
And of course, my name is Jesse Rogers. Good morning from wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to Morning Express. I will definitely take a look at the latest, as Trix mentioned, which encompasses day 2 of the BBI appeal. A lot happened as the top-notch lawyers sort of fought to turn that particular resolution by the 5-judge bench of the High Court. More details coming up. But it being a Thursday, we take a look at the space of youth in politics. That big question about the degree requirement for MPs and MCAs. Is it cutting out? Is it disregarding some youth who might have pursued education on a diploma course, a certificate course, and yet they have the leadership qualities? We'll definitely blow up that particular conversation, so you can tune in till the tail end of the broadcast. Welcome.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take a look at the locals, and of course that story that has been mentioned by Jesse is making headlines on the front page of the Daily Nation, and the Standard this morning has veered off of politics. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what's making headlines internationally, and we'll start off in the Pearl of Africa, Uganda. The Daily Monitor this morning is telling us about what's happening with regards to the coronavirus. I infected my children with COVID. This is a harrowing narration of a woman pictured right here. After about 15 days, we regained momentum, started eating, and everything went back to normal. We later tested again, but the results were positive. We currently eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, trying to stay healthy even after they were infected with the coronavirus. And of course, the angle they're taking is the fact that this mother passed it on to her children. And let's move on to the East African this morning and see what's making headlines. We are told Tanzania to release guidelines on COVID-19. Finally, this country is hearkening to the harsh reality of COVID-19, and they're making moves. This is just one of many. This comes a few days after primary and secondary schools were scheduled to reopen in that country right there. They're also giving us a tally. Still no official statistics as promised by President Suluhu on their COVID-19 infection rates. They're standing at 509. Kenya's at 172,491. Uganda is over 52,000. And there are, of course, we have also Rwanda right there. Eswatini using COVID to crush dissent. According to this report, a curfew announced on Tuesday coincided with overnight protests in the country. Find out how those two are coinciding. And also, Somalia presidential election, or rather vote, set for October 10th. The country will have new MPs and a president by October if the schedule is followed. And COVID-19 in Rwanda has closed its schools yet again. And also Mugabe's daughter fights off land reforms. Mugabe's daughter Bona and her husband have gone to court to block a redistribution of their farm. Let's move on to Rwanda and see what's making headlines. On the Rwanda Today, we're told a violation of health protocols sparks the spread of the coronavirus. And as we have seen right there on the East African, they are closing schools yet again owing to that spread. Then we're told African Union warns EU over vaccine certificate inequity. And we're told African Union has warned that the European Union's non-recognition of AstraZeneca COVID-19 is, of course, unfair. Also in South Africa, news making headlines are that from liberation to hero, convicted criminal. He fell from grace before the end of his second term in 2018, ousted by the ANC, by his own ANC party, over accusations of corruption and abuse of power, and that is former President Jacob Zuma. Also in Tanzania, that we're being told in Rwanda Today about those new guidelines that have been released and the closure of schools in Rwanda following the spread of COVID-19. Moving to Tanzania, the Citizen this morning is telling us analysts are backing Samia over Bagamoyo port. That is pictured right there. President Samia Suluhu Hassan pronouncement that the government has restarted negotiation on reviving the 10 billion $10 billion Bagamoyo Port project has promoted debate on the matter. Take a look at that, find out what more news is making headlines in Tanzania. Also, we are told U.S. exudes readiness to help Tanzania COVID-19 jab agenda. Of course, part of those guidelines, that story is also making headlines underneath that article where they say government to release guidelines as COVID-19 waves strike. The government says it is reviving its guidelines on controlling the spread of the coronavirus in Tanzania. Why death of renowned engineer Mfugale is a big loss to Tanzania. They're taking a look at the loss of that technocrat and, of course, explaining what it means for the country in terms of a loss. And then let's take a look at the final website that we have sampled for you this morning, and that is CNN. Told 100 years of the Chinese Communist Party, 10 moments which shaped it. And as you can see, it's quite interesting, the pictures that are going by, and of course from Mao Zedong to the present, they're telling us what the Communist Party has done for that country, the key moments as they're terming it. Moving on, still in Asia, Myanmar frees more than 2,000 prisoners held since a military coup. Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim to rebuild collapsed Mexico City overpass at no cost. And Quest presses country's finance minister after a shocking report. And in Russia, Putin says U.S. sanctions on Russia even did us good. Find out more by taking a look at the CNN website. They have European news, or rather news from Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Take a look at that and find out more about what's happening across borders. But locally, before me I have the Standard, the Daily Nation, as well as the Business Daily. On the Standard, they're leading with the BBI story, and they're telling us we aren't promoters of BBI, Uhuru and Raila. Now, brains behind the Building Bridges initiative are Suna East MP Junet Mohammed and former Dagoretti MP Dennis Waweru, and not the President and former Prime Minister, court told, as appeal hearing enters day 3. Of course, that is a revelation that many would find interesting. Also, on the Daily Nation, we're told Uhuru Raila final plea. Promoters of the Building Bridges initiative made a final push for their bid to overturn the ruling by the High Court, which derailed the constitutional amendment campaign. Lawyers' argument was that President Kenyatta had been condemned unheard, and that contrary to the High Court findings, the popular initiative had been started by 2 politicians, as the Standard is also telling us this morning. And in the Business Daily this morning, we are told gas prices to hit 6-year high today on new tax, unfortunately. And then employers oppose paying NHIF contributions for staff. Also, we're being told about student in a 24 million shilling NCBA hack case loses M-Pesa code. Now, let's take a look. To help me analyze some of these stories that are on the front pages and within the papers are Kariuki Ngunjiri, who's a political analyst, as well as the UR Member of Parliament, Martis Owino. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this morning, gents. Let us start off with the Standard this morning, and we are being told about that revelation. Of course, it's a revelation to many, especially those who are viewing us from home, that this is not the brainchild of the President and, of course, Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister. It is a brainchild of Dagoretti MP Dennis Waweru and Junet Mohammed, Suna East Member of Parliament. Honourable Owino, what do you make of this, and why do you think this is a story that is actually carrying the day today, because this same sentiment is being shared on the front page of the Daily Nation as one of their top stories?
Thank you, Tix. I think it puts it clearly, because this is where the opponents of BBI were benching their argument. But it should be taken this way, that the 2 statesmen, President Uhuru and Jacob Raila Odinga, meant well when they had a handshake. And that handshake evolved. And what they meant is to have a united Kenya and put back Kenya into productivity path. And what happens thereafter is what we call the promotion line, which was headed by Junet and also Waweru.
Yes.
So it is clear, you know, they wanted to paint a picture that this is a state kind of driven agenda, which it wasn't. And I think there is no any better way of putting the way it has been put in standard newspaper.
Yeah. And Mr. Ngujiri, what do you make of this revelation, quote unquote?
Well, first of all, I think the handshake was a well thought and powerfully conceived idea when it happened. And you know, we have had various handshakes. One happened in Witwatersrand in South Africa.
Yes.
Another one happened at the Korean Demarcation Peninsula. And so it's an admirable political gesture for opponents to shake hands.
Yes.
However, what came after that is now what is before the court of the land. And I think we must not delude ourselves that certain ends were very genuine with the first intentions of striking peace.
Okay.
It was an end to a political card setting.
Yeah.
And that is why it is not true to say that Dennis Waweru and Junet Mohammed are the one who initiated this process. In fact, they had no idea of what was going on from the first day. So I think...
Why? But this is what has been said. Why do you think that is a lie?
You see, from where we sit, and this is a political point, there were the 9 points that were proposed in the BBI document, which would later inform the content that would be changed in the constitution. Who came up with those points? It's the president and the former prime minister. So it's not true to say that there are no initiators of the handshake, but they are promoters. A process has to have a start. And so who birthed this process? Who birthed the 9 points that as given in the Constitution, 257, are required to go to a referendum and others are required to be changed through Parliament? Who came up with these 9 points which informed the decision that has led us now to the highest court? So I feel like we are not being told what is supposed to be a genuine, honest conversation. And thus, we must open up to each other because this is our country. And when we are advancing these talks, we must never put other cards on the chest and try to outwit the rest of the people.
Mr. Ngunjiri, then what would it do for the case for them to pin the BBI on these two politicians? Of what use would that information be?
You see, I think the argument is built on quicksand. I don't think anybody would want to take it as a serious argument because we know where the 9 points of the handshake originated and we know where they came from. It's not Dennis Waweru and Junet Mohammed.
Honorable, we know, what do you make of what he's saying?
No, I mean, sometimes we call this self-pronouncement. You know, if you say we, you know, from the research background and scientific qualifications, you don't. Kenyans were in turmoil, especially after the general election of 2017. And it is clear that the two principals wanted Kenya to go back to peace and prosperity and develop the nation. So if you are looking for where it started, it's with the two people who knew if they were to go the same way they were going, then many people were going to be hurt. And when you see Raila Amolo Odinga and the president, there's so many people around them, and you cannot just dismiss that Junet did not have anything to do with it. It took a lot of time and a lot of people to come for those handshakes to take place. So what we are saying now, let the opponents not demonize what is going on.
Okay.
And I'm happy that our judicial system is working and combing out what are the facts and what are the faults in these things. So to me, I'm happy because this is playing the ground. If these two guys wanted to curtail the process of judicial system, they would have even done it with the High Court. But the process is on. We are waiting for the judgment of this appellate court, and we will move on from there.
Okay, let's move on to another story that's making headlines. Of course, it's one of the biggest stories, and you can continue catching up with the proceedings here on KTN News as the day goes along. But far from that, there's an accusation, or rather a title that seems like an accusation right here on the front page of the Daily, or rather the Standard. This morning on page 8, we're told that MPs made millions from fictitious mileage claims. This is on page 8 of the Standard this morning. And of course, we heard a story that came out the other day. I think one of the dailies put it that they are as broke as we are, when it came out that the members of parliament are not getting this allowances. And the report says that members of parliament were paid 3 times the actual amount, while others received domestic subsistence allowance even when they were out of the country. And more information, as you can see on the screen, tells us that 61 million shillings is the amount of loans that are not being serviced by MPs and parliamentary staff. Honourable Owino, not looking good for members of parliament. What gives?
Thank you. But let us put it to a professional spin.
Yes.
MPs do not write checks for themselves. When they make claims, there is a Parliamentary Service Commission staff that goes through those claims and respond to the claims that are made and they're paid. Yeah. So it's not an audit query on the MP's checks. I want that to be very clear. Having said that, every financial institution or organization always go through audit. And the auditors do have unqualified opinion, and sometimes they distance themselves from making any opinion. So if there is an error, I think the Public Service Commission will respond to that because when audit is done, they give out their findings and what the organization should do and respond, and the time frame where those queries should be responded to. So the media has picked it up, which is okay, but I think the Parliamentary Service Commission need to be given time to respond. And if they do, I hope you will pick also their response and highlight the same way it is done here.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is that there's no honeypot somewhere where the MPs go to get all these monies for themselves, right?
No, absolutely no.
But at the same time, one would argue that there's enough influence to have these amounts of money given to them.
Influence, I don't know where that would come from, because the process is once you do your mileage, there are professional staff within the PSC to go through them and genuinely give you what you deserve. So if there was a kind of double dipping or double payment, then there's a process flow. And that is what the auditors want to know. What happened?
Yes.
Why do you pay this person mileage here when he was abroad? And those questions ought to be answered by the PSC.
Absolutely.
And I know they will. Only I'm asking that the media should pick those responses as well.
Okay.
And explain to the Wananchi.
Yes, then let's get the story that was done by one of the reporters. And once again, the age-old trick of benefit from taxpayers without cause. Members of Parliament have been put on the spot over claims of mileage falsification amounting to 11 billion shillings. A report by the Auditor General, Nancy Gathungu, reveals that MPs have been faking mileage and claiming refunds for it, with some getting paid 3 times the actual amount, while others receive both domestic and foreign subsistence allowance, as Duncan Kayemba reports.
In a damning report that now puts Parliament on the spot over its 3.9 billion expenditure on use of goods and services, 1.4 billion expenditure relates to domestic and subsistence, out of which 11.4 million was paid to the members in respect of mileage claims. However, the report reveals that no explanation was provided as to why 3 members were paid twice or thrice for the same date of travel. Auditor General says further examination of payments for claims by members for mileage and domestic facilitation revealed instances where some members were paid domestic subsistence facilitation and mileage claims amounting to 5.2 million on the days when they were outside the country and already receiving foreign subsistence allowances. The irregular payments had not been recovered by the time of the audit in December 2020. She says in the circumstances, the propriety of expenditure of 11 million and 5.2 million included under domestic travel and subsistence in Parliament's Statement of Receipts and Payments for the year ended 30th June 2020 could not be determined. In 2019, a report by Parliament on mileage claims showed that several members of Parliament received as much as 20 million each for mileage, with those from far-flanked areas receiving over 1 million, which is more than their 620,000 monthly salary. This is not the first time Parliament is being flagged for its honourable mileage fraud. In 2015,
what is wrong with this one now?
Parliamentary Service Commission Chairperson Speaker J.B. Muturi roped in the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to probe the matter after it emerged that some members of Parliament were even claiming mileage for right-of vehicles. Duncan Haemba, KTN News.
Thank you, Duncan Haemba, for that story. Now, I'd like Honourable Owino to respond to that, the details that are emerging from that particular story, also captured on page 8 of the Standard this morning.
Thank you. I think even the reporter got it very well, that there were no explanations given.
Yes.
That is what I said. If there is any qualified opinion from the auditors, then the Parliamentary Service Commission will have to come with those explanations. And this is a process. In process, anything can happen. And if it happens, then it should be explained to the satisfaction of the Auditor General. I mean, the notion that MPs paid themselves is what I refuted in the beginning, that MPs do not write checks to themselves. They claim, and then we have workers who go through those claims and pay them. And that said, if anything went wrong and is found, I'm happy the Speaker said, I mean, call the ESCs to investigate, because if there is any kind of fraud element, investigations are done.
Yes.
And when you are found palpable, then there are many ways of dealing with that. Either you are surcharged or whatever happens, you have to take the responsibility if that was done to you erroneously.
Absolutely.
So the procedures are always there, and this is things that are done everywhere for all institutions, not only Parliament.
Okay. Mr. Ngunjiri, what's your reaction to this story?
You see, sometimes back in the United Kingdom, in the mother of all parliaments, Westminster, there was a problem, and it was because of this mileage issue. And an argument arose, and I think the then Member of Parliament of Birmingham said that look at what we are having right now. MPs that come from far north choose to rely on their cars instead of using free rail or air travel. They would choose to, for example, travel for over 300 kilometers on road, as opposed to using a railway that is free, and they would get passes to travel freely, or use air, which is way much cheaper. Now, implanting the same situation here in Kenya, we have members of Parliament that come from areas that can be accessible through other means, like, for example, train and rail. Why can't we have an organized system whereby to prevent these issues of having claims of ridiculous mileage allowances by members of Parliament? I think it is reasonable that there has to be an inquiry on how some of this mileage money is spent, and even areas that can be accessed through air. I think it is reasonable for us to have, like it was said in the just read budget, to have a radical economic policy shift, which means that we put austerity measures to each and every expenditure by government. But I think, to be very fair to the members of Parliament, because of how our social fabric is set, we exist in a society that depends on handouts, that is, in the constituencies. And I think most members of parliament would be seeking equality rather than equity in this process, whereby maybe we will say, perhaps because of the activities that members of parliament are involved in, and I had the proposal being given in, I think, in parliament, was it in Botswana or Uganda, where they were saying that members of parliament needs to have a special kitty, let's say of like 200,000, that would be set for a contribution within the social status of society. That is a discussion that was there. But here in Kenya, I think for us to move on and end these intrigues that I also don't understand sometimes, we need to have a clear definition of why a member of parliament traveling to Kisumu, and they can easily take a flight from Wilson to Kisumu International Airport or Jomo Kenyatta, why they would require to go and claim for, or rather why they would resort to using road for all those kilometers, which is at the expense of the common person. I think we need to rethink on that economic strategic platform.
Okay. Now, we are also joined by Charles Nguna, who's the Member of Parliament for Mwingi West. He's also going to weigh in on this story. It is on page 8. This is about an audit. Members of Parliament made 11 million in fictitious mileage claims. Honourable Nguna, what do you make of this story? Do you think it paints a clear picture of the situation, or do you support Honourable Owino's assertion that this is a process, and then, of course, if anyone is found culpable, then the appropriate action should be taken after the audit and the findings are put to the public?
Personally, I am shocked, surprised, and also confused.
Okay.
Because it is the responsibility of every member of parliament actually to ensure he or she gives correct data,
yes,
or rather correct information when it comes to claiming of mileages. And I saw the report, and it's really, it calls for ethics and discipline and integrity of members of parliament to give the right information. To me, I'm supporting the idea of actually tempering all what the members of parliament get. And if there is somebody who has overclaimed, let him explain why and how is he going to refer to the state money, because that is taxpayers' money. We expect integrity, we expect honesty, and we expect everything to be done procedurally. Those who have overclaimed, it is a big shame to the two houses, and I think they should be brought to the books, because that is corruption, and we don't want leaders who are corrupt in this country. I fully condemn it. For those who have done it, kindly let us respect taxpayers' money and serve our people without a lot of confusions and, or rather, conflicts. So I think the Auditor General should come up, and the PSC should also come in publicly to declare what all the members of parliament, including senators, what they have gotten. And I think we will clear this confusion from the public.
Okay. And of course, we can only hope for clarity at the end of it all. We're keeping an eye on that story as it unfolds. But let's shift gears to another story that has made headlines this morning on the Business Daily. We are told gas prices to hit 6-year high today on new tax. And unfortunately, this is a story that is, of course, telling us about the 16% rate. And of course, this is the value or added tax that Treasury returned. Cooking gas will today hit a 6-year high after the Treasury reintroduced the 16% value added tax on the commodity, adding the pain of costly energy like fuel and electricity. And more often than not, this usually affects the prices of other things. At the same time, on page page 8 of the Standard this morning, we are told spike in food and fuel prices pushes cost of living to a 26th month high. Honorable Wino, things seems to be getting worse and worse when it comes to the common Mwananchi who is just trying to live. What do you make of this new update?
Unacceptable tricks, and we have been saying this all the time. First of all, many people do not even have food to cook.
Yes.
Leave alone what you're cooking with. But everything is anchoring on the fuel, and because of transportation and ways of making them and all that. So people are not breathing here. And I think as parliamentarians, we'll have to look into this and see the intervention that can be done. Because, as I always say, if you have a tendency of milking the cow to the blood veins, actually you'll be kicked because there will be no more milk to. Corona has even made the situation worse.
Okay.
So when you hike the petroleum products prices, you're even killing the people. And in fact, the magic of a growing economy is to ease things out so that people can get back to the production line and pay more taxes. Now, if you push them to the bricks, then you break their bones, they will not be working anymore. So it's not a good picture for our economy, leave alone those who are victims of this.
Yes.
And that has to be looked into.
Absolutely.
As parliamentarians as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going there. I wanted to know what could parliamentarians actually do to aid in halting this never-ending increase in the prices of commodity in the country, and perhaps why haven't they? Honourable,
There are some things that the Treasury do come with which are not acceptable. I think we intercepted when they were raising taxes on grains, on bread, and other basic commodities. That one we did. This one, there is a kind of a leeway, the way the whole process is designed, that the CS Treasury may impose some things without the House passing it. I think those are the loopholes we have to look into. How do you just wake up or the system of those who are in business of petroleum and all that, just impose taxes without even consulting the House. So those loose ends, we have to look into. What is it that makes some powers in some other areas just do things the way they want without consulting the House? So yeah, there's a loophole that we have to look into and gives the people some breathing space. Otherwise, we are choking our own people with these taxes.
All right, now I'd like to get the opinion of Mr. Ngunjiri on this one. On page 8 of the Standard, spike in food and fuel prices pushes cost of living to 6-month high. Quite unfortunate. We're talking about bread also. Honourable Wino has mentioned that the price of bread has particularly been inching upwards in the recent past, with manufacturers attributing it to the increase in cost of wheat. And of course, today we are talking about gas being added to that. And much of the increase has been due to depressed supply of prices of food, electricity, fuel and others going up. So there's usually a chain. One thing influences the other. What do you make of this?
I think, first of all, let us look at this issue from a prismatic angle.
Yes.
The OPEC countries, oil-producing countries in the Gulf, have not had a huge increase in the oil prices because the forces within those markets and the international cartel in the oil industry is the one that determines how this stuff goes.
Yes.
But I have not seen such a high increase even in other countries, and then one wonders why in our country then the cost of fuel would go up to this high. But to now bring it into perspective using the Kenyan situation, I think, and this is something that we've been talking about, the economic situation in Kenya needs a radical surgery tricks.
Yeah.
I normally read of a guy called Professor Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh, and in some of his articles, ones that have been featured in the New York Times, he says that for a sector that struggles, and he was talking about his country, Bangladesh then, he says, we need so much to empower our social setting, that is meaning the people. We need to focus more on empowering the people,
Right.
so that they can be self-dependent, even when we have international forces influencing changes in the market, then there can be sustainability in their livelihoods. So all this boils down to how we have crafted our economic policy in Kenya. So does the common person get the capacity to respond to the forces that come and influence his or her life? The questions are, and indeed Parliament should inquire into this, whether or not the common person has the ability, and Mohamed Yunus proposes a very good item. He says that we should invest in social businesses at the grassroots, which means that even if today you took the price of, for example, kerosene, 1 liter, you took it from 60 shillings to 70 shillings, at least the minimum wage for each and every person in any day is like, let's say, 400 shillings. That person can be able to afford that. So the first paradigm shift that we must have is to have a change in the economic architecture, where we say, let us empower the people at the bottom. Sawa?
Yes.
Then when we have empowered those people, then they will be resilient, just like the members of parliament. They are here. They do, I think most of them don't even know the cost of a gas cylinder. Maybe because that is done by somebody else. We need to get to a situation whereby the common person does not keep on complaining because they can be able to afford. In the United States, I think they have struggled so much to get to where they are, to a situation whereby they have a minimum wage of a sustainable level. So we should pursue as a country to get to a level of self-sufficient and economic sustainability, whereby the common person who should now be focused on. And that's why sometimes Kenyans are wondering why all these discussions about power and everything. We should now go back to the basics, start from the bottom, now going up. Okay.
And as you're making your point, Honorable Owino said he has to respond to that assertion that he has no clue what the price of gas is. Honorable Owino?
I listened to my friend here, but it's more of a textbook than reality. You know, the MPs are products of community production. We are not just cut from anywhere, from top of the tree to be here. For example, when he said also that we should have a choice of using a train to go to Lewa in my constituency, we have never even seen a railway line or a nearby airport. But let it be known that MPs are quite integrated in the community setting. For example, the calls which I receive, that's why I say the communities are choked up. The calls which I receive, the people that comes to the office of the constituency, to my home, everywhere, the people I visit, all those widows and children and their arms which who are left to them, they don't have food to put on the table. We know more than anybody else what the community is going through. And what I would just say, there's nothing like bottom-up here all the time. Governments are set to cushion people. You talk of USA, they have a wonderful system. Biden have just released $1,600 check to every family the other day to cushion them. So even if there is marketing forces or market forces pushing these commodities upward, the government have to have a system. This is why I was saying, as parliamentarians, we'll have to look for the intervention button and see, we have to intervene here because this is choking our people. We cannot just allow market forces to drive things up. We cannot allow CS to, add taxes anyhowly. We have to stand up for our people. But no, saying that we don't know what is going on, I think he has just said that because he's not a club member. But
if he were, he would understand. If
he was one of the MPs, he would think otherwise. Because we even go out and use our money to, subsidize our own vulnerable people in this line.
And you've mentioned something very important, market forces, because this article also asserts that Kenya might have imported inflation from China, its largest trading partner, after factory prices for most goods in the Asian country shot up. And manufacturers in China have, of course, passed the increased cost to customers. Well,